This is the third Monday of meeting in the clearing, and I started a couple of weeks ago just with it felt like it'd be a nice thing to do to clear a bit of space in the week and meet with no strong plan of what would happen or anything like that, but just an intention to sort of find some clarity, find some space together, and sort of hope that what needs to happen happens. I've introduced Nicole in the email, so you may have read that already, that we've just been getting to know each other a bit over the last few months as part of this Clarity for Teachers program. We've had a couple of conversations apart from that. You're in a very interesting position, I think, Nicole, in terms of kind of inheriting this tradition in a way, and it being your task, I suppose, to make it useful or keep it alive or make it alive for us, and present it in a way that feels right to you, feels appropriate to where we are. And I've just really enjoyed hearing from you, kind of your experience of Zen and that path that you've been on, and how you think about clarity, or what you do to get clear, or just to handle things. And so I thought it would be lovely to hear from you a little bit about that, and we might ask some questions as we go. And yeah, I think that's it. That's the setup. Here we are. Good evening. Should do a quick how is everyone? I won't force anyone to say, but would anyone like to say how they are, how their day's been? Just Lembo, wiggly hand. Okay.
Good.
Wendy, thumbs up. Yeah. Liz?
Feeling revolting after Dominic Cummings, really, and then trying to go for a nice walk in the park to get rid of all of the disgusting politicians, and seeing big groups of like 18 people sat in the park having a lovely time in the sun, and just feeling like I don't like any of this. So I'm quite grumpy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's quite all right. That's what we're here for. Bring whatever.
But I
you
woke
have
up very
to the
happy
clearing.
this morning, so no, it's all right.
Sort of averages out.
Yeah, totally.
I was also, for anyone who wasn't watching it or isn't in England, there was a very long press conference, a very sort of politicky thing that was very hard to stop watching, and very distracting, put it like that. And so I think I'm finding my way back from that as well. Hello, Victor. Hello, Karen. Nice to have you. Nicole, is there anything you could do to sort of start us off, to settle those of us who are lightly traumatized by political press conferences and would like to kind of land in a nice forest glade all together?
Let's see. Well, I could just maybe say a few more words to introduce myself, just, thoughts that came up as you were introducing me.
Yeah.
I have been reflecting recently again on, you're saying inheriting a tradition in the Dharma Sangha where I'm practicing. And I don't know if you guys, are you somewhat familiar with Zen practice, or what's your level of familiarity?
Let us say no.
That's okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, Zen is a Chinese and then Japanese Buddhist tradition, and the way it's now present in the West there are several institutions and they've developed fairly differently. I mean, I actually feel that when I go to, while there's something like a shared flavor, which I think is basically the main practice of Zen, is just still sitting. And I'd be happy if we, I don't know, if we get to that point, I'd be happy to say a few things about still sitting and maybe have a sit for a few moments or something like that. The basic idea in Zen is you know, all you're given, it's kind of open space, just like us now. So we Zen people are improvisers, like improvisers. We get a start time, the bell rings, then we're told to sit still and figure out how to survive. And then there's an end, the bell rings again. But in between, it's unstructured. I mean, in terms of what the mind does, it's unstructured. So the feeling is something like you trust whatever arises, and you learn how to deal with it. And there's very little instruction. So it's kind of like you have your own mind, teach yourself how to meet yourself, maybe on a moment-to-moment basis. Yeah, and in the tradition where I am, so having said that, different Zen centers have developed fairly differently. In my lineage, I am the first woman who's teaching. So I don't really know why that just came up as you introduced me, but I guess when you said how you handle things, so yeah, I've had to do a lot of handling to find out how to inherit a tradition that's been so, in Japanese culture, very male dominated and pretty much, you know, a young man's, a little bit militaristic, macho type thing. And for me, having to translate that into my particular personality and then a woman's body is, I'm exploring that as a really wonderful, exciting opportunity to do something new. So yeah, that's a few things that I can say about what I'm trying to do. And Zen in the West is, Zen is by it being so, the instruction itself being so really open to, it's all about how do you meet the next thing that happens. And so the teaching changes quite a bit, and it adapts from culture to culture quite a bit. So I feel like, I don't know, I'm just always interested, and so I'm interested in this meeting as well. Some feeling of finding the edge of where each of us, where are we at? What's the edge of what we can feel? What's the edge of what we can think? And how can we reach maybe a little bit beyond that and into ways of feeling and thinking and maybe acting that we don't even know yet. Finding ourselves in ways that we don't know ourselves yet. That's my interest. Yeah.
I have lots of questions.
Oh.
And I saw nodding as well. So I imagine other people have questions as well. So just to say, you're not an audience. We're here, you know, in a room, in a clearing together. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, wave or interrupt if it doesn't feel disruptive. And we'll just, you know, follow the flow of things. But I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you end up inheriting a tradition, and like maybe how that happened, or also just what that means. Like, how do you go from walking down the street or going to a meditation class or something, and then you're responsible for a Zen tradition now?
It kind of feels like that's what happened, yeah. But I think there were steps in between, I suppose. No, what happened is that I found this place where I'm at now, which you see a little bit of the background. I'm in our seminar room here I'm in the Black Forest in Germany, right at the where France and Switzerland and Germany all meet, right in that corner. And I came to this place sort of by coincidence when I was 17, and my dad dropped me off here. And I mean, I said I wanted to go to a place where I can find myself, but neither I really knew what that meant, nor did my father. So the way we chose this place was that a friend of my father's gave him, I don't know, maybe 25 brochures of places where this friend thought somebody might be able to find themselves. So it was like therapeutic institutions and all kinds of new agey yada yada, so just various places. And I started looking at them.
You managed to produce a brochure.
Yes, that's right. That was the criterion. Yeah. Yeah. So I was 17, and I knew nothing really about how things work. And I looked at brochures, and they all basically promised to be it, to you know, like, if you come here, this is really what you need to do. Except this one brochure that was just black and white, and it only said the year, like it only said at the time, it must have been 2000, it said the year 2000. And then it said, I'm in the tradition of Zentatsu Beikaroshi, who gave the teacher the title and the date for when something would happen. And it just did that for the whole year, all these programs, but just title, teacher, date. That was it. No, like, you're gonna gain great insight or none of that, just title, date. And so, but I didn't know how to make a choice. I didn't notice that brochure was different. But then what I did is I put them all on the ground, and I thought, geez, I don't know how to make this choice. So if intuition actually exists, it's gonna have to work now. So I closed my eyes and pulled the brochure. And it was that boring thing, that one that only was black and white. So I was a little disappointed, but I thought I'd go with the flow and came here. And I was, for this place at the time, I was incredibly young. I mean, the next youngest person was maybe 60 or something like that. And they didn't know what to do with me. And Beikaroshi was here. And he was really worried that somebody had just dropped off their kids, and he didn't know what to do with me either. So he just started taking care of me. And so Beikaroshi is the lineage holder. I didn't know at the time that he was actually a relatively big deal, but I thought he was a nice old man who was very friendly. But he told me much later, he thought at the time that basically he couldn't accept me there. I mean, he felt I was too young, and but he had, I don't know, he had grown a liking to me. I asked him real questions because I had some, you know, I was just, I guess, pretty intense, like I really wanted something. And so he didn't want to send me away, and but by not sending away, he felt that he had to sort of take responsibility, and just kind of made sure I was okay and checked in with me and so forth. And we just got to know each other really well. And he was the first person in my life where I felt that he never told me, like he never gave me answers to my questions, but just over time I realized that what he was doing, he was showing me how to ask the right questions. What he kept doing is he would bring out questions behind questions that I couldn't have thought of. Maybe I can give you a couple examples later. But anyhow, without getting any specific answers from him, I just kept finding myself really engaged in this practice. And I really, really liked the still sitting. So from liking the place very much, liking the people very much who were here, and liking the teaching very much, I just kept coming back, even though I was only a high school student. And then as soon as I finished high school, I moved here to Johanneshof. So I was 19 at the time and started living here. But then I realized, well, I can't, I'm too young. I don't want to live like a monk. And then maybe when I'm 35, I'll discover that now I don't have any other place to go anymore. So I decided I wanted, even though I was pretty clear, I wanted to continue to just practice. I also wanted to be free to practice. I didn't want to be dependent on the place. And so then I studied psychology, finished my degree, and then the first thing I did is I moved back to a practice center, which at the time then was Crestone in Colorado, where I lived as a monk for 4 years, just up in the, I was gonna say the Himalayas, but it's actually the Rocky Mountains. And yeah, so I lived there in a hut, and it's a great community. It's in the same tradition and the same lineage. And then after that, I came back to Germany, and basically ever since then, I've been the director here at Johanneshof. So it's not just, I didn't just walk down the road, but I did sort of stumble into the place. And then, but then ever since now for 20 years, I've been doing this and living at one of the two centers basically. And inheriting, how do you inherit a tradition? Zen is said to be a teaching outside the scriptures. And what that means, it's what you can't memorize, or like you can't, what you're inheriting, you don't read that, you know, you don't, it's not knowledge in that sense. What you inherit is something like what's considered really the you know, whatever it is that makes the body be alive. Like, what is it that makes the body be alive? Like, this thing here isn't exactly alive. But whatever it is that makes the body be alive, you inherit that feeling, like a specific way of being alive, by practicing with a teacher, usually for, you know, 10 or 20 or 30 years. And at some point you don't really know anymore. Your way of being alive is so almost exactly like their way of being alive, even though you're a different person, but you have a similar feeling. And when that happens, there's a feeling of you've inherited a tradition. And then the feeling is you don't necessarily do exactly what your teacher does, but you do it with the same feeling. And then you can continue, the tradition stays alive. You can continue it if you have learned the feeling, yeah, how to apply the feeling to new contexts. Yeah.
Yes.
I just ask about, like, that bit about feeling the feeling.
Yeah.
Is that like over a long period of time?
Mm.
Is okay. Like,
Absolutely.
how does that happen? Like, where is that happening, or how is that happening?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. For me, there's something that happened almost, no, that's not quite true. I was going to say the first time I met Baker Roshi, but that's not true. There was a specific moment when I first met him, I didn't know he was a teacher even, like he never said he was a teacher. I just thought, you know, for some reason he felt responsible for me, that was clear. But at some point he gave a seminar. I actually drove with him to the seminar, and I was really shocked when then he ended up going up on the pedestal and he started teaching. Why is he doing that? Why isn't he waiting for the teacher to come? Then I found out he was the teacher. And what happened for me is that in that seminar was the first time I heard him say certain things about how he understands, I don't know, I mean, like just things, how he understands things. And I remember, I mean, it was, I felt he shifted. He was able to, with his words, it was like he changed my life. It was like I had never seen things that way. And it made me cry. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was necessarily that profound or that deep or anything. It was just so resonant. And that's the first time I felt the feeling of I don't know, I guess for me, what it's like when you see things a certain way, and then you go through some opening and it just feels truer. It may not be the final truth, but it just feels truer. And that movement of, oh, it can continue to just feel truer. I could start seeing that that's what he was doing, like with his entire life. And I loved that. So I don't know, there was that. And then there's something you just, Baker Roshi told me at some point, you learn, having a teacher is like, you need to learn, or a teacher's job is just to be known. For a Zen person, if you're gonna be a teacher, you need to be willing to be known by others. With your mistakes, just as who you are, you need to be willing to be known by others. And so, yeah, I don't know, I guess there's a relationship that develops between teacher and disciple that has that kind of unconditionality.
And you've told him this story about the day you discovered that he was the teacher?
I did, yeah. He said, you were pretty dumb when you first started.
I've got a question. I'm not sure if I can remember exactly how you said it. Hi, Nicole. But you said something about, these are my words, but finding yourself or meeting yourself doing something in a new way, like becoming a new person in the way that you responded to things differently than maybe you might have done previously. Yeah. Can you give me an example of how that is there? Yeah. Right.
Can be, you know, in really simple ways, actually. Like, I don't know, of course, about each of you, but I suppose I have certain, sometimes unconscious views. I mean, there are certain things that just that I know I don't pay attention to. Like for me, for instance, I just don't pay attention to plants for some reason. I don't know why. They never, nobody ever told me they were important, I guess. So I can walk down paths and just not notice the plants, like, at all. It's just not who I am in my self-image, or like in my patterns. And in a really simple way, this newness has not so much to do with me, but just has to do with that, I mean, yeah, at the risk of sounding, how can I say this more specifically? Well, I don't, okay, I'm gonna have to make a little decision here now. I don't want to talk away too much, but if I'm gonna jump into the next thing, I'd have to say a few things about meditation. Should I run into that riff, or should we develop more of a shared conversation? Charlie, what's your feeling?
Yeah. I think you should just carry on.
Just carry on?
We're
all
listening.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. You just explain whatever feels helpful.
All right. All right. Well then, okay. well, that's the thing, Charlie, I had in mind that I might talk about. So
Yeah, please do.
Great.
Floor's
yeah.
yours.
All right. Well, look, here's a little sentence that
Okay.
has been really important to me recently. It's in a koan. Have you heard of koans? It's like they are stories, usually where two monks talk to each other, and they're not really understandable in any commonsensical way, but they are, each of the statements in such a koan is like a teaching position. And anyhow, it's a particular non-rational way of taking positions that, well, you'll see. I just read you a sentence and it'll be an example of what I mean. The whole earth is a student's volume of scripture. A student of Zen is meant here. So, I mean, or somebody who actually investigates these things. The whole earth is a student's volume of scripture. The whole world is a student's eye. With this eye, read this scripture. For countless eons, eons, is that an English word, by the way?
Yes.
Like long time? Okay, for countless eons without interruption. I say it is not easy to read. What this is Earth is just, you know, Mother Earth, materiality. That's what's meant by Earth, like the stuff, materiality, Mother Earth. And then he makes this distinction here and says the whole world is the student's eye. So he says earth and world. And I think in this sentence here, it's pretty clear from the context. With world, what they're exploring here is, I will end up answering your question, but it is gonna be a little, with world, what they mean is that as our human mind, which these teachings are for, our human mind, I mean, any sentient mind represents the world in their mind, right? It's like your perception of the world is not equal the world. It's just your perception of the world. Doesn't mean it's all subjective and arbitrary, but it's just that. It's your perception of the world. Like a bat has a different perception of the world, or a fly, or even Victor has a different perception of the world. So it's there's earth, and that's materiality in this sentence. So there's the actual stuff that hosts, brings forth all of us living creatures, and brings forth in this context here on a spectrum. Like there's no, in these texts or in this feeling here, there's no fundamental difference between matter and sentience. There's like, matter is the mother of brings forth life. Everything, the whole universe brings forth life. And then as life is brought forth, beings develop like us, and we have a perception of the world. And that's what they say here with world. So earth is the matter, and world is how the earth is received in a person's mind, or represented in a person's mind. So what they're saying here is, read, first of all, that Mother Earth is your scripture. If we're studying Zen, this is what we're studying. We're studying existence. We're not studying some book or some ideas of some person. We're studying the stuff of the world. And we're trying to develop an eye that knows how to meet the stuff that exists. So what that means is something like, if you want to meet what actually exists, you want to make your eyes be free. You know, not many assumptions in your eyes, not much clutter. You want your eyes to be wide open, ideally. and have your eyes, develop your eyes in a way that they actually see, your ears so that they actually hear, and so forth. So you develop a feeling in which it's like you want to listen to the world. And I don't always listen to the world because I'm too caught up in what I think is important and what kind of person I am and what I need to do next and so forth. So my ears and my eyes are not reading the scripture. My ears and my eyes don't actually touch earth. But if I walk down a path like between our buildings here, and I have this kind of feeling, I feel, okay, I want to read the scripture. I want to read the scripture. What I call I here, the big I wants to be open to actually listening and reading what the scripture has to teach, has to say. So then I might take steps, and I suddenly notice plants and how the one plant, like there's that one plant that kept annoying me before. I just don't think it's very pretty, and we have it all over the place. But now in this other mind, when I ask for its text, like when I ask for its, like, what is it saying to me? It's almost like I can, a little bit, as funny as, but a little bit as if I knew what it's like to be that kind of plant. And a little bit as if I knew what it's like to be that butterfly that approaches it. And then I look up, and it's a little bit as if I know what it's like. We have these falcons here that go, and I can almost feel what it would be like to have such wings and to cross the open sky or something like that. So it's that, so it's not so much about me, like, oh, I'm a new person, but I feel new things that I can't feel in my limited views. And then that is, it's a little bit like a shared self with the world that allows me to feel new things. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah.
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 Thank you for your question. I was kind of hoping I could say that sentence.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that sentence has been on many levels kind of, it's been important for me.
Could you say the sentence
Could you read
again?
the koan
Yeah.
again?
Oh yeah.
I like how he says at the end, I say it is not easy to read. And he goes, the whole earth is a student's volume of scripture. The whole world is a student's eye. With this eye, read this scripture for countless eons without interruption. I like that too. They're pretty tough here, like for countless eons, not just like not for the next 5 minutes, but countless eons. And by the way, without interruption. And then he goes, I say it is not easy to read. Well, I tell you. It's like, check something here. Oh yeah, it's nice to see Karen. You look, for the first time since I've seen you, you look healthy. For the last 3 months, you've always been with a blanket and.
Thank you. I was just
Yeah.
thinking how beautifully glowing and healthy and everything your countenance is. It's such a joy to be in your presence and
Thank you.
sharing this. It's a wonderful gift. I'm grateful to
Thank
be
you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm back in Germany, obviously. I've been for Karen and Liz I know, and Victor I know from this call. And but I've been in Japan for the last 3 months.
I have a nasty question bubbling up inside me, and I don't want to ruin the party, but as I understand the monastic tradition, we are involved in studying the world or the earth as it is. And this has a kind of a regenerative function, perhaps. It makes sense. There is learnings to be done at any given moment. I understand that. However, this is my question. I find myself living in a world that seems to indicate that it could use some major structural adjustments. How do you listen to something that doesn't yet exist?
Ah, great question. I'd actually love to hear Charlie's response to that.
Oh, man.
Isn't that making you think of the Arundhati Roy quote? You know, another world is, if you listen very carefully, you can hear it breathing. That there's a new world coming. I can't remember the quote. I was kind of hopeful there when I started to speak that somebody else might know it.
But I did expose myself to it, twice. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's what occurred to me.
Well, if the floor's mine, then when I heard the line about you know, being this world, being this eye, looking at the earth, it reminded me of this image that I have when it comes to being clear, of all of us being like antenna on the planet. That, you know, we have our eyes and ears, and all of us have different perspectives because we're all literally standing in different places. And so the earth is covered with these incredibly sensitive antenna, who are able to interpret what's happening and imagine things that don't exist yet. And the way that I learned to go to work or learn to study at school and things like that was quite a lot about shutting off those antenna and sort of doing what I was told and doing maths because it was maths time and the bell rang, rather than listening for what was needed, listening what the antenna was telling me, you know. But like, none of us lose touch with it completely, because we still have the antenna of I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm tired. And when you think of I'm hungry, you could say that it's about the future. That it's like your body saying, in the future, I see a better future, another world that's possible where I eat a sandwich. You know, or when you're tired, you could say that it's seeing the future. You're like, in the future, there's another world that's possible where I'm sleeping. But you're not really seeing the future. You're paying attention to something that's inside you already. You're paying attention to a need for sleep, a need for food, a need for whatever it might be. And so I think your answer might be in your question, Bembo, of you know, you might feel hungry, or you might feel sleepy, or you might feel that the world needs large-scale structural readjustments. And in a way, you're not listening for the future. You're not trying to see the future. What you're trying to do is get clear about what you're holding. Like it's like there's a tension in me because certain structural adjustments have not yet come to fruition, and I'm going to hold that tension until they do. But what's the detail of the tension that I'm holding? Like, what do I actually want? What do I need? You know, what kind of sandwich? What, you know, where do I want to lie down and sleep, or what kind of political system or something like that.
So the world can't possibly be as bad as it seems, so there must be something wrong with me?
No, the
I mean, hunger and sleeping are cyclical things. We know them. We're talking now about a new challenge that we've never met before, I think.
But I think we have the way that we see and understand the world when it comes to eating and sleeping is the same way as when we want to write a poem or see our friends or build a community or write a book or have a party or whatever it might be, that we're listening for it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It just means that we're listening for what we're holding on to that doesn't exist and like out there yet. And the more that we listen to it, the clearer it becomes until we know what step to take next. And as we take the next steps, it becomes more and more likely that it appears around us.
It's exactly how I feel about that too. Maybe add a word to how you've been describing that process, at least from my point of view as well, Charlie. I think it's very important to be in touch with what's there. I mean, if we at present, for instance, I think a little smaller scale, not the entire world, but we need a new structure here at the place where I live as well, at Johanneshof. Like there are problems and so forth, and need a new structure. And I could think about it idealistically, but I think it's important to feel and think in the horizon of what's possible and not what's ideal. At least that's from my point of view, and that's what I appreciate in how Charlie has described this, like you're listening in the context of what's actually there. And then the word I would add is something like imaginal. In other words, when we're in a meeting here that totally goes wrong, it's a little bit like break it down again to things like hunger and what kind of sandwich and so forth. When I meditate, even though my spine is maybe crooked and there may be tension in my spine, if I listen to my spine knows what uprightness would feel like. It knows its own potential. Like the hunger knows its own solution. I don't need to, this hunger knows, I don't need to know. The spine knows its own uprightness. When I'm in a meeting here that goes awfully wrong, something in me, the very thing that knows this went wrong also knows what would have felt good, also knows what good would be like. It's that same knowing. And I think for us to be present in the world like that, we know what would be good, but we need to be that person.
You said at the beginning about being the first woman in this leadership position in your order, and I'm just really interested to know more about that.
Yeah.
And I guess because I'm the first woman leading the UK Unitarian Church.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
we've probably got quite a lot to compare notes on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what you said at the beginning about sort of the body. You sort of mentioned sort of being a woman, but sort of the woman's body in that as well. I'd just love to know more.
Yeah, well, first of all, also relates to what we just, I mean, at least in a different way. I went through a few pretty dire years because what I needed didn't exist yet. I mean, I really liked the tradition, but it clearly was a male tradition, and it just it was like I had to decide between whether I wanted to be a monk, literally a monk, not a nun, but a monk, or a woman. And the two just wouldn't match. And it tore me apart. It literally tore me apart because I wasn't willing to let go of the one or the other. And so I on that level, also on that very personal level, I resonate with the difficulty of what Embo was asking, like, how do you do that when it's not there yet? Like, what's there to relate to? And for me, it led to several really dire years of not knowing, not wanting to let go of one or the other, but there just was no solution for me. And it took maybe 4 years of literally listening to both, listening to what is the tradition really about, and listening to what is being a woman really about. And boiling both of these down until I was finally at a level where they weren't contradicting anymore. And once I found that point where they weren't contradicting, but that actually, I mean, maybe in response to your question, with regard to the tradition, I had to strip. I mean, I had all these ideas of the tradition, like a monk is you're supposed to always be vital, and you get up at 4:30 in the morning, and then you stand out barefoot in the cold and you hit the han, right? And then you go meditate and you sit there, you just don't move. And you have that kind of attitude. You can see how my body does that, right? It's like, and this body, my body, just didn't want to be like that. I just got harder and harder, and I just didn't want to be like that. I liked the clarity of it, but I knew it wasn't me. It wasn't how this body could find power and clarity, and my body got weaker and weaker, while the monks next to me were getting stronger and stronger. and I was at a point where I didn't even have my period anymore. Like it was down to, I didn't have time for it. It was down to 1 day a month. Yeah, it was tough. And when I talked to people about it, they didn't see the problem. Like, they were all men. I didn't see the problem. And so it took me a long time to validate the problem. I mean, it took me a long time to actually believe myself I had a problem. And I needed to step out. I mean, personally, I couldn't solve it in the system. I fortunately dislocated my shoulder, and that allowed me to step out, like, for 6 months almost. And in those 6 months, I had a shaved head and so forth. In these 6 months, I grew my hair back and just decided I had to strip, as I was starting to say, I had to strip my ideas of what a monk looks like. I had to let go of just much of the ideals. That it was all enmeshed. Like, I had to strip what I would now call the Dharma, like the spirit of the teaching. I had to strip that of its male form. but that took a long, long time of, I would say, incubation. I couldn't think my way to it. It took a long time of incubation. And then it took courage, because there was no, people literally didn't see the problem. And only when I really believed myself, I had a problem. Only when I really believed it did I, and then my hair was kind of like a revolution. At first I tried to cut it, like my teacher, Baker, she kept saying, well, you really need a haircut, when I first started letting it grow. And I said, I just said no. I said, my hair will grow. It'll grow until it's down, until I step on it. I won't cut it anymore. And at some point, everyone around me respected it. And then I knew I had sort of broken through. And since then, I've just been doing what I want to do.
Amazing.
Yeah, but it
thank
also,
you.
excuse me, maybe one more. It also took stripping my ideas of what a woman is, both. I also had to get free of several ideas around that and find my own answer in both of these questions. It'd be interesting to check in with you about your experience of that. That would really,
Yeah, that would be great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that I found that really interesting. And when you were describing it, it made me think more about my experience in sort of corporate life and and the kind of, you know, business equivalents of monks, and what it's like if you're a woman. Yeah, not in a nice way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The other, that's just a fascinating story and way of understanding it. But the other thing that popped for me is in thinking about being a teacher and some of the things you've said around, you know, the teacher has to be willing to be fully known, but also that transferring of the spirit, and that it isn't the knowledge or the, you know, particularly passing the baton of knowledge, but it's having that deep understanding of the spirit of what is being taught. And then with what you were saying, and by having the understanding of that spirit, that then allows someone else to go off and teach in their way, but that's in alignment with the spirit that you have transferred or taught to them. And so that step of being, it feels like, I don't know how to do this, but the idea that in what is being taught to us from other people, that ability to strip what is their expression of the spirit and the way that they're expressing that spirit from actually the spirit that is being taught, to then allow us to teach that in the way that is us, you know. That I'm stumbling with the words here, but that feeling that there is, I think I have a tendency to think that what is being taught and the way they're teaching it is what I'm there to learn. And so that's really beautiful to look at stripping what is their expression of the spirit, and does that dilute or enhance the spirit that's being presented. And then it gives the freedom to take that spirit and move it forward in my own way. If I've stripped my own expectations of myself out of it, that process of transferring and stripping expectations is, I've never linked the two that way, and it's really beautiful and powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say something? These stories and conversations are very, very rich. And it reminds me of an article that I read this weekend in the New York Times about the way a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. And it said, you know, we read that, and there's a book that somebody's written about that for children that describes it realistically. Because it says we're always dealing with the magic of the caterpillar transforming into the butterfly. But he said, what happens actually in the cocoon? And he described what happens. He said that the caterpillar kind of turns, everything dissolves into kind of a mush. That is actually and what's left is sort of a chrysalid, I think, that motors, if you like, that has the imprint, the genetic imprint of the transformation. And it uses all of that degenerated material that's actually very rich in nutrient to transform into the butterfly. And when I read this koan, which is so beautiful, about the whole earth being the student's volume of scripture, and then going to the world, which is like the subjective. And then I think of my relationship with the earth, and I hear Charlie talking about things not existing, and I hear Nicole talking about her process of recognizing what was in her that wasn't really part of her, and to dissolve that and find her own path. And I say to myself, well, when I come to a little blockage in myself, maybe the simple answer is to say, well, whatever I'm thinking, like, for example, the need to ask always for permission to speak, may not be doesn't exist. It's just part of my, it's just something that I can just let go of. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I thought that the metaphor of this caterpillar and butterfly was particularly apt. Mm-hmm. And I love the non-existence, to be able to say to oneself that there's things inside that are part of, like Charlie would say, the story that you tell yourself, that don't actually exist, and not part of the energy, because it's the energy that's the truth, right? So that's one thing. And then the second observation is, with this, I read this scriptures for countless eons without interruption. So I guess that means that we're all part of this long chain of students without interruption. You know, when you're reading or learning or whatever. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you. I think you just talked us out, kind of thing. Take that as a closure as we get to 8 o'clock. So we can leave with this image of the butterfly, and yeah, with these countless eons of students and teachers that we're part of, all trying our damnedest to listen and see the earth.
I remember an invitation to meditate together.
Yeah. Should we could it's 8 o'clock, so what we could do, if you're all right with this, Nicole, maybe we could set something up and we could just sit quietly and then just each leave when we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
If that's a couple of moments, then it's a couple of moments, and if we just sit here, and then I'll just switch it off when the last person leaves. Is that okay? Okay.
I have a bell right in front of me. I just need to get it.
Great. I don't think there's
Our
any.
next cocoon.
So much, both of you.
Victor. Oh, I remember Victor.
Okay.
You know, our bodies are on both sides of the earth world. image. Our bodies are the matter, our materiality. And they are also body minds, in which the world is held. So when we sit, we hold a little spot of earth very still, so that the mind's eye can sink and actually meet this little spot of Mother Earth in the form of our bodies. It's one way of sinking our way into meditation. How do you feel about that meeting?
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
very much enjoyed it. I didn't mean to talk so much, but I really liked the contact with people a lot. It's fun.
It was perfect. Yeah, yeah. I really love that the way you described sitting, the way you introduced the sitting.
Mm.
It felt like the sort of last step of where we'd walked together, where it's like, okay, given that, you know, the earth is the scripture to be read, and given that the world is the way of reading it, and given that we're, you know, antenna and we're just trying to become clearer in our eyes, then this little revelation of that, like, we might think that we think up here with our words and our intellect and our knowledge and things like that, but just sort of blowing that away, you know, for a moment, and having this other way of listening where you might like sink down through from the mind to the heart to the body to the earth, and that what you spoke of was, yeah, this beautiful idea that this little piece of earth, you know, that our body's this little piece of earth, and so like what a delight and a joy and a privilege, you know, what a sort of miraculous opportunity to be able to close our eyes and draw that mind that is the body into that earth that is the body.
Yeah.
and like sit there as both things.
Yeah.
And like and just to do that and feel the sort of endless juiciness of that, you know, that like the life that's in that, and from Bembo's question, having this feeling that like the more fully that we can sink into that, the more fully that we can unite body as earth and body as mind, and the more fully that we can, you know, like almost the more carefully you listen with the body as mind, the more and more subtle signals it can pick up. So it's almost like it can listen for more and more of the earth. And that if we can sync enough, unite enough with this piece of earth, the body, then it will naturally do its thing of being connected and getting signals from the whole of the rest of the earth it's a part of. You know, in that mundane way of I'm hungry, I'm tired, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it feels such like like the first step on a path.
Yeah.
Of like, oh God, I'm terrible at it. You know, like a real like, you know, sort of beginner's position of, you know, if the task is like, how can you familiarize yourself with your body as a mind and your body as a piece of the earth to the extent that you can listen with such an attentive subtlety that you could really be that antenna and listen for the next step that's needed, not just for you, not just for your house or your family or your town or whatever, but for everything,
Exactly.
taking everything into account, then choose the next step. And that feels like, oh God, that's gonna take a while to get good at,
Oh yeah. It's quite a cliff.
Or
but that's
just
beautiful how you describe it. Yeah, no, what
endless space to
yeah. Well, that's very touching for me to hear. That's because for me, as I said, this phrase and opening it in, I mean, once I recognized, wait, this body is Earth. And that means it's not me meeting the world. That means it's the eye of the mind meeting Mother Earth or something. I mean, that's just such a different distinction. And such a different meeting. It's not between me and outside, but it's between mind and matter or something. And it's so, for me, it's totally revealing. And that's where, that's presently when we spoke about Zen and intimacy, it's that feeling that this is all about for me. I just find it when I use that instruction, just very physically, what happens is my body just begins to tickle all over and to open itself, and it's like, it's much like you described for me as well. That antenna are sent into their kind of natural intimacy.
And I could imagine if you started with the enormity of the task, if you're like, right, sit down and you have to listen for everything in the world all at once, it would feel like, horrible. But because it can be a delight from the first moment, like every tiny step you take towards being more kind of maybe naturally intimate with body is mind, body is earth, and that feeling that just feels good, from being one step there. And then if you can sit there and find 2-3 steps into there, it feels better. And it's like finding out there's a bottomless ocean of happiness just sitting here waiting to to deepen and deepen and deepen.
Those of you who study the mystery, do not spend your days and nights in vain. I urge you. It's from the Sandokai. It does make me feel that way when just these moments are just, I mean, why would I ever want to do anything else? I would just live that feeling and share that feeling and so forth.
What was the poem that you were going to read?
Oh yeah, let me read that to you. I think you'll like it. It's from Muso Soseki. The book is called Sun at Midnight, and it says, all worries and troubles have gone from my breast, and I play joyfully far from the world. For a person of Zen, no limits exist. The blue sky must feel ashamed to be so small. Isn't that great? The blue sky must feel ashamed to be so small. I love the sky. Who would think of that? You look at this guy, everyone thinks, why is that big? But he goes, he must be ashamed to be so small.
Ashamed.
Yeah. when I was in Japan, I visited. He's he's just a totally amazing monk, Musu Soseki. And I visited his gardens. He's mostly famous for having made two cultural world heritages, just incredible gardens. So stunningly beautiful. Yeah, really enjoyed that. And during Corona, I was there all by myself. I sat for 4 hours in this most famous garden, which is usually you can't. I mean, there's like thousands of people there, so all by myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
It was a lot of fun. I'll see you with the teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I just don't have time for the other Tuesday calls. Are you there for those?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least I wish I could. Usually it's too much.
Yeah.
But I see you the Tuesday after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
All right. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
You too.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.